What is up, sixth grade? Mr. Uwe here, coming to you live and direct from my house. Obviously, I'm not there today. I forgot to tell you that I was going to be out today because of some professional development. I will be returning on Thursday, no worries. So here is definitely what you guys need to make sure that you do today to be successful. I'm going to be going over some notes and teaching some math even though I'm not here. So please make sure that you listen to all the subs instructions and make sure you take some good notes today. Should be fun, so let's take a look at what we need to do. Now again, you're probably asking yourself, dude, Mr. Uwe, that's not you. Where are you, Mr. Uwe? And the answer is I'm learning about math at a conference right now. So I have the opportunity to further myself as a learner, which is, again, what I expect from you guys on a daily basis. So I myself am somewhere learning, so what I expect from you guys is to also be learning. So let's take a look at what we need to learn today, and let's make the best of this situation. So let's take a look. All right, so our agenda for today is only three things. So the first thing that we did yesterday was the weekly agenda, so we got that checked off the list already. The second thing that you need to make sure that we are able to do is this introduction to a thing called absolute values. If you remember yesterday when we filled out our weekly agenda, our topic and unit of focus this week is absolute values. So by the end of today, you should understand what absolute values are and how to calculate them. After that, you're going to have some individual work time to work on any of the tasks that we have this week. You have plenty to work on, so I definitely want to make sure that I give you time for that at the end of the period. But before that, let's get into the meat of the math today, and let's take a look at some absolute values. Now, one thing I want to remind you guys of before we get started today is remember the points. I gave the sub full capability to give points to any groups who are participating and making sure that you're answering questions. So please make sure that you're staying on task and remember the two rules in my class: respect and trust. So I'm trusting you guys enough to respect the rules in our class and make sure that you're respecting the sub and listening to what they have to say, and make sure that you're carrying on participating, because remember, those points are definitely something you want to start banking up until we cash them in later this week. So get as many points as you can, be good, and let's take some notes here. So let's get started. All right, so like I said before, today's all about something called absolute values. Now, before we start, one of the things that I want to make sure that you understand is that you're supposed to take some pretty good notes today. Now, I know it's kind of weird to take notes without the teacher there, but technically I'm there. I'm not there, but I'm actually there with you guys. So don't be afraid to ask questions. If you have questions that you're too afraid to ask, write them down. And when I see you again on Thursday, I'll address them. That'll be the first thing I say. I'll say, hey, do you guys have any questions about the lesson that I had? Be brave to ask questions and also be brave to participate today. So first thing I want to make sure that you guys do is set up notes. So if you take a look at this diagram here, what the sub is going to do now is they're going to pass out just a blank sheet of paper. This piece of graph paper that they're handing out is going to represent your notes. So once you get this piece of paper, all I want you to do is to fold it in half hot dog style and label it those two things. So in the top box, label it brainstorming / thinking, and in the bottom, label it main ideas / what I need to know. So pause the video here and take a second and get your notes set up. Pause the video. Cool. All right, so what you should have now is you should have your notes all set up. So now that you've got your notes all set up, let's take a look at what we need to find out about absolute values today. All right, so what I want to start with is recalling something that we learned at the beginning or at the end of last week, and that's all about opposites on the number line. So if you remember, we looked at number lines and we looked at opposite pairs of numbers. So the first question that I want to ask that you guys can earn points for is this very simple question. When you're sitting on a number line, which direction are the positive numbers in? Don't yell it out. Pause the video here and raise your hand to answer this question. Cool. If you said right, you are right. I'm so punny even when I'm not there. So please write this down in the section that says important ideas or main ideas or things that I need to remember, that positive numbers All right, so you can write that down however you see fit. Remember, your notes should be in your own words, so they should make the most sense to you. So let's keep on going for this recollection and see if we can answer more questions. Next logical question is the following. Which direction are the negative numbers in then? Don't yell out the answer. Pause the video here, raise your hand nice and tall, and see if you've got the answer. So pause the video. Now, if you said left, you would be correct. So the negative numbers are in the leftward direction. So again, please write that conclusion down that we found before, that the negative numbers are in the left direction. Please make sure that you write that down, again, in that section that says main ideas or things I need to remember. Now, the third question that I want you to recall is, where is 0 on any number line? So if you recall, we also were able to identify where 0 is in any number line. So take a second, think about it, come up with your answer, pause the video, and raise your hand. All right. So hopefully you came up with some answers there. There are a bunch of different opinions that you could have said, but remember what we said is that 0 in most cases is directly in the middle of the number line. Not only that, 0 cuts the number line exactly in half, separating the negative and positive numbers exactly. So where can you find 0 on any number line? Let me hear it. Right in the middle, or right where it divides the negative and positive numbers. Cool. All right, so this last question I want you to recall is all about the word opposite. So if you remember, we understood what opposite numbers were in a couple of different ways. So what I want you to do is I want you to pause this video and think for about 1 minute. In this minute, what I want you to do in the box that says brainstorm or what I'm thinking, I want you to try and remember how we know two numbers are opposites. So I'm going to leave this picture up here. Pause the video now and try and answer that question. Again, the question is, how do we know two numbers are opposites? Pause the video. Cool. So now that we understand and have heard some people's opinions here, remember that we know that two numbers are opposite in two different ways. The first way is that they're both the same exact numerical value. The only difference between them is one has a negative sign attached to it, whereas the other one has that invisible positive sign attached to it. Another observation that we made is that they're opposites because they're equal distances from 0. So if I imagine standing at 0, one of the things that I can observe is that they are equal distances away from me. So the cool thing about opposite numbers is that they're equal distances away from one another. So here is one of the biggest things that you need to remember from last week, and it'll definitely help you with your understanding to the brand new stuff that we're about to uncover. So good review, let's keep on going and let's check out some brand new information. All right, so here is the moral of the story for today. Today, we are working with one thing and one thing only, and it's called absolute value. So everyone say absolute value, say it. I can't hear you, let's try again, say absolute value. All right, pretty good, not too bad. One of the biggest things that you need to be able to answer today is this question. So I want you to write this question down in the box where it says main idea, okay? Write down this question. The question is, what does an absolute value mean? By the end of the period, you should be able to go back to your notes and answer this question. So what does absolute value actually mean, and how can we describe it? So let's take a look at what you need to know for today. Make sure you write this question down. Pause it if you need some time to write down this question, but make sure this question is nice and big in your second box. All right, so our job today is to come up with a definition of what absolute value means. Now, before we actually start doing that, let's think about something that we know and that we've experienced in real life, because we all know that's how we best understand things, when we apply it to things that we already understand. So take a look at the picture here. Interesting picture that I took directly from the freeway. So what information does this sign tell us? Take a second, maybe a minute, 2 minutes here to come up with as many ideas as possible. Remember that there's no right or wrong answer here as long as you're able to justify your reasoning. So pause this video, take 2 minutes in the box where it says brainstorm / what I think. please give me what information this sign tells us. So take a second. Let's talk about the information that this sign tells us. So pause the video. All right, cool. So we heard some information on here. The two big ideas that you should probably come up with is that it tells you, number one, where you're going for sure. And number two, it tells you how far away something is. Now, the biggest thing that we need to understand here is that today is all about distance. Yesterday, I gave you guys time to work on some tasks that dealt primarily with distance. Why that's such an important concept is because absolute value is nothing more, nothing less than distance. So the biggest that we can sort of bring this to is the fact that distance is measured between 2 points. So I remember yesterday when you guys were working with Google Maps, you guys had 2 different points that you were measuring from, whether that be from your home to the beach or from your home to school. You were measuring the distance between 2 points. So this is an important definition. So you got to make sure that you take a second here, pause the video, and write down this sentence in the box that says main ideas or important information. So take a second, write this down on the second box so that you have it ready to use as we move forward. So pause the video and hit play when you're ready to resume. All right, so like I said before, one of the things that we used yesterday to calculate distance was Google Maps. So Google Maps is definitely a great application that helps us calculate distance. Here is a picture of me calculating the distance from Calavera Hills all the way to the Tamarack Surf Beach in Carlsbad. So take a second, look at this picture. Can anyone tell me what the distance is from here to the beach? So pause the video here. Take some hands here. I'll take 1 or 2 hands to tell me what the distance is from here to the beach. So pause the video. Let's hear your answers. All right, cool. If you said 4.9 miles, you'd be absolutely 100% correct. Now, if you notice, there's 2 other routes, but the only route that's highlighted that I care about is the shortest route here. That's 4.9 miles. Now, I'm going to ask you another question. This question is a little bit different, but I want you to consider your answer before you shout it out. We know that the distance from Calavera Hills to the beach is 4.9 miles, but what if I asked you, what is the distance from the beach to Calavera Hills? So imagine going backwards in your trip. Take a second, think about it, and consider what that distance would be. So pause the video here, think about it, and let's take some answers. What do you think the distance from the beach to Calavera Hills would be in this situation? So pause the video. All right. One of the biggest conclusions that you should make here is that it doesn't matter which direction we're traveling in. If we're going from point A to point B, both ways are the exact same distance. And in this case, 4.9 miles is the exact same distance whether you're going from Calavera Hills to the beach or from the beach to Calavera Hills. So distance is something called an absolute value. It doesn't matter which direction you're traveling in. That value stays the same. That's why it's called an absolute value. So here is the biggest thing for me is that distance is often measured in specific units. And on Google Maps, distance is measured in miles. We can definitely change those settings to make it measure in kilometers or even feet. But one of the things that we need to ask ourselves is how we measure distance on the number line. So this is our number line. Remember, it's got 2 arrows in both directions. We know where the positives and negatives are. We know where 0 is. How do we measure distance on a number line? So let's think about this question here. One thing that I want you to consider is whether or not there are any units on the number line. Think about whether there's miles attached to them or feet. How do we measure distance? So one of the things you need to make sure that you write down, which might be brand new information to you, is that we measure distance on the number line in units. So star this, put this nice and big in your notes, that we measure distance on the number line in units. So there's no feet, there's no miles, there's nothing attached to it but just the word units. So we don't know what those are, they're just generic units on the number line. One of the things that I want to do to try and get good at understanding distance on the number line is playing a game, because you know I love playing games. So this game is something fairly simple. It's called Find That Distance. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a number line, and there are 2 dots on it. All I want you to try and figure out here is how far away, aka what is the distance between the two objects on the number line. So let's try this out. All right, question number 1. What I want you to do is I want you to take a look at this number line and consider the answer to this question. What is the distance between these 2 points? Pause the video here, come up with your answer, and let's talk about what you were able to come up with. So take about 1 minute here, and in the box that says what I think or brainstorm, write down an answer to what you think the distance is between these 2 dots. So pause the video here and come up with your answer. Cool. So what you should understand is that if we measure distance between these 2 dots, we see that we can measure 1, 2, 3 different steps. Now these steps are called units. So the answer here is that the distance between these 2 dots is 3 units. Bada bing, bada boom, there's us getting good at distance. Let's keep on getting good at this skill. Try this one on for size. Again, tell me what the distance is between these 2 dots. Look at the picture, take a second, formulate your answer, pause the video here, and raise your hands if you've got an answer. Pause the video. Awesome! If you said 2 units, you would be absolutely 100% correct. So notice there are 2 different units that are in between these dots. One of the biggest things for me is that this is so visual and it's easy for you to see. It's just a matter of getting good at it. So let's try another one on for size. Ooh, tricky, tricky, tricky. 2 dots again. What is the distance between these 2 dots? Be careful when you're counting here. Let's see if we can be as careful as possible, and let's get some hands up that I have not seen yet. So take a second, pause the video here, look at the picture, and calculate what is the distance between these 2 dots. So pause the video now. All right. So let's see if you were able to come up with the answer. So let's count together. So from -3 all the way down here, let's count. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you said 7, you'd be absolutely 100% correct because there is definitely 7 units in between these 2 dots. Good job, good job, good job. All right, so now that we're pretty good at finding distances between 2 points, let's make some observations. So this is where you need to pay close attention to the pictures and really consider what you notice about these pictures. So let's take a look, and we're just making some observations here. All right, so what I have here is another scenario. Excuse me. I want you to take a look at these 2 number lines. What you should notice is that there are definitely 2 distances to calculate here. The only thing I want you to do is to write down in the top box where it says what I think / brainstorm things that you notice about these 2 distances. So pause the video here, take about 2 minutes and come up with as much as you notice about this picture. So pause the video, let's see what you're able to notice. All right. Raise your hands and see if you were able to come up with these things here. So take a look. Did you notice that the top has a distance of 2 units between their marks? And did you notice that in the bottom there is also a distance of 2 units? Cool. If you noticed that, give yourself a high five. Great job. Did you also notice that they are both placed at opposite numbers? So did you notice that 2 and -2 are opposites? Not only that, we're measuring distances of equal distance here. Did you also notice that there were 2 dots in these distances that were placed at 0? So they had that in common. Did you notice that? Interesting. Take a look at the next one. Do you notice anything similar? Now realize that even if I move the dots, you should still realize that similarities are pretty much the same here. They're both located at 0, so both of these distances start at 0. And if you calculate the distances on both of these number lines, I see that the top distance here is 3 between the 2 dots, and in the bottom here, the distance is also 3. Interesting. Now the point that I'm trying to make here is no matter where I move these dots, one thing they have in common is that I'm counting distances from 0. Now remember we talked about how important 0 was on the number line and how it's just this weird outlier that's super duper important in a lot of cases. And that doesn't change today. 0 is the most important number for today, and I'll tell you why. Because absolute value is nothing more, nothing less than the distance from 0 that a number has. So take a second, pause the video here, and write down this statement in the box that says main idea or important information for me to know. So this is the conclusion for today. The most important thing you need to understand is that distance from 0 is called absolute value. So absolute value is nothing more, nothing less than the distance of a number from 0. Here's another way that you can write this down in your notes if you're not a fan of the full sentence. Using some shortcut language here is really cool to me. So commit this to memory. Everyone say absolute value. Say absolute value. I can't hear you. Say absolute value. Say distance from 0. Say distance from 0. Awesome. So absolute value is distance from 0. So this is the main fact for today, and let's see how we can use this to answer some questions that we could potentially see in some skills review. So let's take a look. All right, so here is how the questions could be asked of you. So here is a standard question that could be asked on any math test that deals with absolute value, and it says, what is the absolute value of 5? Now that might seem confusing, but here's what you need to think of when you see a question asking about absolute value. I want you to think instead, what is the distance between 5 and 0? You know the answer to that. I know you know the answer to that because this is the picture that we should see in our minds. The absolute value of 5 is nothing more, nothing less than the distance from 0 all the way to 5. So if you had this picture, wouldn't you agree that the distance between 0 and 5 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units? So to answer this question, the absolute value of 5 is 5 units. So my answer to this question is 5 units. Let's get good at this because this is the type of question you need to be able to answer to successfully complete the skills review for this week. So let's take a look at another example. All right, example number 2. Let's take a shot at this one. This one says, what is the absolute value of -2? So pause the video here, think about it, come up with your answer, and let's talk about your thinking. What I want you guys to volunteer is I want some brave individuals here to tell us what the absolute value of -2 would be. Let's see what your thinking is, and let's see if we can all agree on the answer here. So pause the video here, think, and let's hear some answers. All right, so if you were raising your hand and you had the value of the absolute value of -2 figured out, you should have thought to yourself, oops, what is the distance between not 5 and 0, but -2 and 0? So if I'm thinking about this, the question that I'm really answering when it's asking about absolute value is what is the distance between -2 and 0? So on a number line, if I'm thinking about this in my brain, I think where 0 is and I think where -2 is. So answer this question. What's the distance between -2 and 0? Again, on the number line, what I can see is that it's only 2 units. So my answer here is that the absolute value of -2, aka what's the distance between -2 and 0, is only 2 units. So boom, I've answered this question. Bada bing, bada boom. Let's do a couple more examples to get good at this. All right, for this next one, this is asking the same question, just a different number here, is what is the absolute value of -3? So I want you, by yourself, to work through this all by yourself. So on your paper, in the box that says brainstorm or what I think, I want you to reimagine this question on the number line. So when I ask you what is the absolute value of -3, what is the picture that you should be thinking of? AKA, what is the distance from 0 to -3? So take a second, draw out the number line in your notes so that you're thinking about it, and let's come up with the answer. So pause the video here so you can draw out your answer on your notes. Pause. All right, so What should the absolute value of negative 3 be? Again, we're thinking about what is the distance between negative 3 and 0. So your number line should have looked like this. Negative 3 and 0 should be marked, and I should be thinking to myself, what is the distance between negative 3 and 0, aka the absolute value? So the absolute value between negative 3 and 0 is going to be 3 units. So my answer here is nothing more, nothing less than 3. So the absolute value of negative 3 is 3 units. Let's take a look at our last example. See if you can get good at this one, and see if you can do this one all by yourself. This example here, I want you to make sure that you're able to figure out these types of questions by the end of today, because the skills review that you're going to receive from the sub is going to require you to answer questions just like this, okay? So try this one on for size. What is the absolute value of 4? Again, take a second, make sure that you draw the number line out. It's really important to me that you know how to do that. It helps you think your way through the problem, and it's definitely something that I want to make sure that you understand. That you're not just answering the question right away, that you understand what the answer actually means. So what is the absolute value of 4? Pause the video here, draw out your number line, and let's see if your answer matches. So pause the video. All right, cool. So again, one of the things that you should have thought of is, what is the distance between 4 and 0? So your number line should look like the following. There should be 2 dots on it, 1 dot at 0, 1 dot at 4. And what you should be able to calculate is, what is the distance between these 2 points? If we count here, let me go back to the last slide. Won't let me go back. Hold up real quick. So if you go back to the last slide, I can't go back, I don't know why, but your answer should have been 4. So the absolute value of 4 would be 4, because there's 4 units in between 0 and 4. So here is what I want you to try by yourself right now. If you want to flip your paper over, I think that's a pretty good idea, especially because the front of your paper might already be pretty full. So I want you to try these 4 questions out. Now, what I want you to do for sure for each of these questions is to draw the number line. So please make sure for these 4 questions that you're trying right now that you draw the number line for your answer so that you understand where your answer is coming from. Now realize for numbers like 400 and negative 50, you should be mentally thinking your way through this, drawing a number line to help your reasoning, but you do not have to put down 400 tick marks. That would take you forever. So hopefully pause the video here and try and work your way through these 4 problems, and then replay the video or play the video so that you can see if your answers match. So pause the video now and try these 4 by yourself. All right, so for this first one, what is the absolute value of 6? The distance between 0 and 6 would just be 6 units, so my answer here is 6. The next one, what is the absolute value of negative 10? So think about that number line again. Between negative 10 and 0, how many units are in between? There would be exactly 10 units between negative 10 and 0. Now, no matter how big the number gets, realize that you should probably start seeing a pattern here in your answers. So the absolute value of 400, you're like, dude, that's such a big number. But if you think about it, the distance between 0 and 400, aka the absolute value, would be nothing more, nothing less than 400. So bada bing, bada boom, there's my very simple answer. Last question here is, what's the absolute value of negative 50? So again, imagine on the number line between negative 50 and 0, how many units would be in between? So if you count it, it would be exactly 50 units. So these are my 4 answers in order, and this is exactly what you need to be able to leave with today, saying that you understand absolute value and how to answer these types of questions. So pause here, ask for help if you need it for sure. Now is the time at the end of our lesson to ask ourselves our final question. So let's take a look at the final question for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's wrap it up. All right, so I want to end the class with a very simple discussion question, and that is, going back to the very beginning of our lesson, remember the essential question that we wanted to answer was, what does absolute value mean? So think about this. You can look back in your notes, but here is something that I'm going to say is worth 2 points. So I'm going to ask for one brave individual to answer this question and see if you can come up with the answer here. So the answer that you're looking for is, what does absolute value mean? So pause here and find that one brave individual to give their group 2 points. All right, so hopefully the brave individual that raised their hand said that absolute value means something in the line of the distance between a number and 0. So remember, absolute value is nothing more, nothing less than the distance of a number from 0. So absolute value, distance from 0. Everyone say absolute value. I can't hear you. Say it again. Absolute value, distance from 0. Distance from 0. Awesome job. So this brings us to the conclusion of the lesson. Very cool. Great job taking notes. Keep those notes safe because I want to check them off on Thursday to give you some points for your participation today. And stay tuned for some instructions now that we have finished the lesson. So let's take a look at what you need to do now that the lesson is done. All right, so what I'm going to ask the sub to do now is I'm going to ask the sub to hand out the skills review, aka the questions that you need to answer that go along with this lesson. Now, before you start working on it, so as the sub is handing this out, before you start working on it, on the back of that paper, I want you to make sure that you answer these 4 questions. So the 4 questions I want you to answer in order on the back of that paper, on the skills review paper, is the following. So number 1, what did you learn today that was brand new to you? For all of us, pretty much, the idea of absolute value was something that you were pretty much brand new to from the very beginning of the day. The second question that I want you to answer is, what were you great at today? What skill were you great at? Were you great at counting the number line? Were you great at understanding distance? Be honest with yourself. Think about something that you totally rocked out of the park for sure. The third question is very, very important to me, is what skills do you need more help with? So do you need more refresher on this when I come back on Thursday? Are there things that you need clarification on? Definitely ask me questions. And last but not least, give me on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I did not get this lesson at all, 10 being I can teach this lesson on Thursday, Mr. Uy. Give me a scale 1 to 10 of how well you understood the lesson today. Now, I know it's difficult trying to understand something when I'm not there to ask questions, but there are a ton of people in this room who definitely can help you out, whether it be students that are sitting at your table. The sub can definitely help you out, or any other adult that might be in the room in terms of helping you out for sure. So please make sure for me that you ask questions today if you have any lingering questions, and definitely if you still have questions by the time you leave today, feel free to ask me on Thursday, because I guarantee there might be some people who are still a little bit lost. So thank you very much. The next slide are just logistics about how you should be spending your time now. So please make sure you are being productive during the period. Great job staying tuned and tuned in. Hopefully your notes are great and that you had some great discussions and then you earned some points in your groups. So let's see what you need to do now with the remainder of your time. So let's take a look. All right, so here's what you should work on now. Now that we're done with the entire lesson, the first thing that you should focus on is the reflection questions that you are answering on the back of your skills review. So I'll put those questions back up in a second. But before you do that, just listen here so that you understand what to do moving forward. So the remainder of the class time is for you to work individually or independently on things that you need to finish for this week. So after you do the reflection questions on the back of the skills review, make sure that you start completing that skills review on the other side. So those are the absolute value questions. Those are due before you leave today. So please make sure that you spend some time on those and make sure they're 100% accurate. Make sure to draw the number lines in on those questions too. So don't just answer them with a numerical answer. Please make sure you draw the number lines in, just like our previous work that we did on Friday. Once you're done with those two things, so the reflection questions and the skills review, now you can actually look at your weekly agenda and start working on the things that we started yesterday. So that includes the research with the Google Maps, the group task with the Google Maps, and the creativity with you researching one profession. So realize some reminders for this type of time is to be productive and be respectful of other people who are trying to get in the zone here. So use this time wisely, because you're definitely going to need it to finish everything so that you don't have a ton of homework as you leave. So biggest thing for me is that you really take the time today, look at your weekly agenda, see what you need to finish, put any final touches on things, and make sure that you turn in the things that you need to turn in before you leave. So again, just for review, the only thing that's really due today before you leave are the reflection questions and the skills review. So please make sure those two things are done and turn in. Once those are done, keep on working towards finishing the other tests that we have this week. If you were absent and didn't get a copy of what you were supposed to do, aka the weekly agenda, please make sure that you refer to one of your table mates for some help there. You can also just navigate to Google Classroom and you will find all of the information that you need on there. So definitely do your best to work productively and be respectful. This is where I'm going to ask the sub to make sure that they continue to hand out some group points for groups that are working productively. So please make sure that you're keep racking up those points, and I will be putting up the questions in the next slide. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you guys. I'm going to miss y'all, but I will see you on Thursday again. So definitely do your best today and make sure that you do what you need to do before you leave. So this is Mr. Uy signing out, your friendly neighborhood math teacher. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon. Peace.